What's up? Welcome back to my channel, or for the first time if you're new, I'm Sylvan, and today I'm going to be reacting to Chasca's character teaser, Love and Peace. I'm very interested to see what this has to it. I'm looking forward to Chasca and the new version, so feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, and let's get into it. Some kind of standoff?
Yasha, the Inca gang called dibs on this job.
Okay.
And that means it's yours?
Job conflict.
Not in my book.
Yasha, back down, or you're not gonna like how this ends.
Makes sense for this kind of
We
setup
had an
for
understanding.
what we know
But
her
taking
position
you out
amongst the
sounds
tribes
like
is.
a better deal.
Boss, now's our chance. Let's get him. We'll show you. Yeah, let's go.
Oh, I like the little texturing of the
She's
dots.
here.
Hell yeah.
Inca, Yasha,
Got a bit of
do
that
me a favor
westerny
before this
vibe.
gets ugly. Let's talk this out, shall we?
Chasca,
I'm loving
this will end
the
in
aesthetic
blood.
of all this.
There's nothing you can do to stop it.
Enough talking. Let's fight.
Ooh.
2 against 1, huh? Looks to me like you.
I
put
love
aside
the
your
little
differences
sliding of the
without me.
weapons.
Chasca, we came to spill blood, and that blood is yours.
With you out of the way, we won't have to watch our backs. How's that for peacemaking?
Okay,
Here's
is
a
that
little
the opinion
gift
of her?
From the Inca and Yasha gangs.
Wow, she does not care.
Little late for regrets. Don't you think?
You misunderstand me. Dealing with you, that's the easy part.
Okay. Nighttime now.
Another fight? You're still
Aww.
injured. Safety first.
Why you gotta do this
How
to
many
me?
times do I have to tell you?
They were hardened criminals,
So this is in the
I can't
past
be
at some
reasoned
point
with.
then.
so I had to.
Oh, or maybe it isn't. Or maybe it isn't. Oh shit.
I almost forgot.
Oh.
My messes don't need excuses anymore.
Oh shit. Okay. You got me there. You got me, Genshin. Oh yo, you got me. So I'm actually a really big fan of this one. It's a really straightforward, really simple, really just 2 scenes. It starts with the standoff between these 2 gangs. Clearly the right gang is in some way associated with the Children of Echoes, and the left gang is associated with the people of the Canopy. And interestingly enough, we can clearly tell that we're in Natlan based on the background geometry. It has those big, blocky plateaus and stuff. But the terrain we're standing on and the vibe of the entire place is very much that western, arid, deserty, sunset type vibe, which is interesting because that isn't necessarily a vibe that is super tied to Natlan or Chasca, but as I believe I mentioned way back when we first got looks at all of the characters in the one animation that I'm forgetting the name of, I believe I called out that Chasca had a bit of a pseudo-cowboy look to her. So it's interesting to see that sort of subtly mirrored here. But anyways, so we have this conflict. We get all the real premise we need from it really quickly, with the right side saying that the Inca gang called dibs on this job. So there's some kind of job that they're doing, and as is implied there, and with the following lines, this other gang seems to also have staked claim to the job. So regardless of the exact details of how both of them ended up on this job, both of them are dead set on doing the job themselves and gaining whatever reward comes with that, and they're willing to fight each other for it, as we see. We get this gang clearly showing that they don't have much respect for the other gang by saying, and that means it's yours, as if though they laid claim to the job and called dibs on it, that doesn't mean that they're just going to sit back and let them do it. And it's here with this first shot where it's still subtle, but we can begin to see it a bit more clearly that, especially in his eyebrow and some of the shadows here, you can see that they have that sort of comic book dotting going on, which I forget the official term for, but it just does a good job of giving this that sort of comic book manga aesthetic almost, which becomes even more so once the split paneling comes in. But we have him calling her out, saying back down or you're not gonna like how this ends. implying violence. She mentions some kind of understanding they had, but clearly that understanding is now out the window, as she says, but taking you out sounds like a better deal. This is entirely just arbitrary speculation, but from these lines, the sort of implication I get of the dynamic here is that these are two gangs from different tribes that have frequently butt heads before and come into conflict, but came to some kind of arrangement, potentially splitting off and designating who can take jobs where, that kind of thing. And from the sounds of it, it might have even been sort of in the favor of the gang from the people of the Canopy. But now, as conflicts are rising up again, the Children of the Echoes gang seems to think that they can maybe just take them out and sort of push out more. And as I was mentioning, we get some like comic paneling style stuff going on here. Something I like a lot about the way they did this is they didn't do the simple thing of just having the line cut everything on the previous shot away to show the new stuff, but rather they did some more complex layering of things so that we have the background of the original shot being cut away to reveal the other gang while still keeping the leader of the Children of Echoes gang in view, which means that though spatially the shot has them much farther apart to the point that they wouldn't be able to have this much of a close-up and both of the leaders in shot with each other, this is a way so that we can have them staring each other down face to face much closer at this level of detail, which is just a really solid piece of cinematography. You get another shot where it's more traditional paneling, more of their faces are cut off, but then they hear a swoosh of wind, a kukasaur overhead, and they realize what that means, or at the very least the gang from the people of the Canopy does, as the leader says she's here. We wipe down, and we just get a glimpse of her before the dust poofs out from her, obscuring everything, and then we have her silhouette. As the guitar comes in, the music goes up a level. And once again, this is a very sort of westerny vibe. The silhouette of the cowboy coming out of the dust as the rather dramatic guitar begins. And as she comes out, holding the brim of her hat over her face, she calls out the names of the two leaders, showing that, as has been the case so far in the story, it seems, everyone in Natlan is fairly close-knit. Notable people know each other, or at the very least have heard of each other. And in all likelihood, Chasca is more aware of a lot of people, and potentially troublemakers, given her position as a negotiator and peacekeeper. Potentially, these two have gone in conflicts that she had to resolve before. That would make sense given the implied dynamic between the two gangs. Seemingly knowing where this is gonna lead, she says, "Do me a favor before this gets ugly. We move in, let's talk this out, shall we?" Recognizing that this is almost certainly going to end up in a fight, but still offering the olive branch. Acknowledging that perhaps we can still talk this out. Might not be likely, but maybe. I offer it all the same. And it's at that she looks up, we get one of her eyes, the brim of her hat still covering the other, and she's smiling. We get this cool slide in of the paneling from before of the two people, most of their faces cut off, just their eyes, can't even see their mouths, as Inca calls out Chasca, just in sort of an annoyed, aggressive tone. This will end in blood. There's nothing you can do to stop it. While Yasha sort of rolls her eyes and says, "Enough talk. Let's fight." And rather than it fully cutting to a different shot, they do a cool transition move here, which makes it feel like a seamless shot, where the borderline between the two sides of this image grows outward, spinning to become a vertical line as it shifts from their faces to their weapons, lifted up over their head. Comes down, becomes dark, and before we even see where their weapons landed, we just have the shot here of Chasca holding out her bow, eyes closed, seemingly with no real effort, as it quickly pans out to reveal that she's just holding their weapons at bay, no issue, despite the fact that that's a great sword and a big hammer. And she's just one-handed, no real strain as far as we can tell, casually holding them off. And we can hear the struggling of the two gang leaders as they try to push past her defense. And Chasca just opens her eyes, sort of glances at them and says, "2 against 1, huh?" And then she sort of smirks almost and says, "Looks to me like you put aside your differences without me." Acknowledging that despite the fact this was initially the two of them getting into a heated confrontation to the point that they were about to try to kill each other, they both easily decided to attack what they perceived as a greater threat to them both and team up effectively, even if they didn't consciously acknowledge that. And Chasca is just mocking that fact almost, teasing them over how willing they were to work together as soon as something bigger than their petty grievances showed up. And then we move into a 3-panel shot, and Inca says, Chasca, we came for blood, mirroring what he was mentioning earlier. And that blood is yours. Initially, it was going to be Yasha's and her gangs, but that's changed now. Now, the only person they're intending to spill the blood of is Chasca. But she's still smiling, clearly doesn't care too much, and Yasha, sort of continuing the statement, clearly they're in tandem at this point, says, with you out of the way, we won't have to watch our backs. How's that for peacemaking? Which is interesting, the idea that they have to be careful, they have to watch each other's backs constantly, in almost fear of Chasca arriving and stopping them in their tracks. It paints Chasca as much less of a peacekeeper, as much as she is a dangerous, ever-present and ever-watching enforcer of the peace. She isn't instilling peace by negotiation and diplomacy, but rather she is enforcing it through violence against those who would damage that peace. And we can see truly how much she does not care about what they're saying by the fact that she just begins to check her nails, probably not even listening to what they're saying at this point. But Yasha continues saying, here's a little gift from the Inca and Yasha gangs. And as she says that, these shadows of the gangs sort of loom in over her, but she is still completely unperturbed by it. And she just sighs and says, what a mess. Finally pointing her attention back to them. Inca says, little late for regrets, somehow thinking that he has the upper hand in this scenario. And Chasca decides to clear things up for him, saying, you misunderstand me. And suddenly she moves before they can even process it. She's in the sky with her bow drawn, her silhouette completely defined by the sun encapsulating her as she clears things up. Dealing with you, that's the easy part. But given how this then goes into this next scene, I would imagine that what she means by that unfinished statement is the mess that she's going to have to deal with isn't fighting them, isn't dealing with the actual fighting, but rather trying to explain and justify her actions of beating all these people up to her sister, clearly having not properly processed that her sister is gone at this point, which works on 2 levels. On the first, it's just a fun, badass thing of Chasca saying that the real challenge isn't what anyone would think it to be. It's not the actual fighting or the dealing with these thugs, it's something more personal. And that's just a fun sort of badass thing. But then the second aspect is the tragedy of that she is so naturally assuming that her sister will be there to be upset with her, that in this moment, she doesn't even process the fact that she won't. And she continues to not process that. As we move into a night scene, the moon now overhead, the music shifts to be calmer, as we then see Koichi, who says, another fight? Based on how this scene goes, I would imagine that this is more of a mix of memory and imagined scenario than reality. I don't think that Chasca is literally seeing visions of her sister, as much as she is both reminiscing about what Koichi would say to her when she found out about this, as well as imagining what it will be like when that happens, forgetting that it won't happen anymore. And this image of Koichi continues to berate her, saying, you're still injured, why are you getting into fights still? You need to recover first before you get into any more fights. Safety first, after all. How many times do I have to tell you? And we shift to Chasca, never having the 2 of them in the same shot yet. As Chasca says, they were hardened criminals. They can't be reasoned with. And she sighs and says, so I had to, as she reaches out to where Koichi is, but cuts herself off as no one's there. That moment that she attempts to pass over the border to reach out to her sister, she isn't there. They're separated now. Koichi is only in memory. Chasca's still in the world, which is tragic. It's tragic to see that this is the position that Chasca is in the mourning of her sister. But it makes sense. If this is not long after the story, she likely hasn't had the time to process the fact that her sister is gone. She's probably been so busy that she hasn't really had the time to think about it and probably doesn't want to think about it. And as one of her hands is still reached out to where her sister should be, she places her other hand on top of it, almost to force herself to give up on reaching out. Her hand's shaking. Trying to steady herself, she takes a deep breath, and she just says, I almost forgot. She was back into this normal cycle, these normal experiences that she had day to day. And she had this expectation of what a conversation with her sister would look like in this moment. And it made her almost forget that that won't be happening anymore. And she finishes out the teaser by saying, my messes don't need excuses anymore. The cycle of Chasca's life at this point had been settling disputes between people through violence with ease, and then being berated and taken care of by her sister. And she had gotten used to that. Based on this, even looked forward to it, or at the very least, was comfortable enough with it to reminisce about it and expect it. And though the words themselves, "my messes don't need excuses anymore," could be seen as a personal positive in the sense of, oh great, nobody's going to be berating me daily anymore. But the way she says it makes it clear that even if she doesn't think that her messes, quote unquote, are even that, and that she's completely justified in her actions, she misses those little arguments she'd have with her sister about them. And she had grown used to coming up with those excuses. And it's potentially only here that she really acknowledges that she doesn't need to do that anymore. There isn't anyone to berate her, to question her actions, as the only person who was willing to do that is gone now. And that's just fucking tragic. It's really impressive to me that this teaser is just the first one since the previous portion of the story, and it's already capitalizing on the cost of that story, the people who were lost. In many ways, Koichi is the representation of that loss. Because as I would remind, though at the end of the day, Movika's plan worked and Natlan was victorious, the death count was still in the thousands. Koichi among them. And so I'm really happy in the darkest way possible. From a narrative standpoint, I'm really happy. And from a personal standpoint, I'm really sad that they are continuing to emphasize that cost and that hurt. Acknowledging that the loss of those people, despite the victory that was earned by their loss, that loss still carries a toll on the people who are left. And Chasca and Koichi's relationship essentially exists as a much more personal representation of that for us in the story. And it makes me really curious in the most morbid way possible about how they'll be carrying that into this interlude storyline as well as into the finale. But with that, that's just about all I have to say, as this is ultimately very straightforward. It's really just hyping up Chasca for a bit into an emotional gut punch. And it works. It's solid. I like it a lot. But with that, I think I'll leave things there. I'm looking forward to seeing Chasca's demo coming up soon. I'm looking forward to the new version, and I'm overall just excited. So feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment on your thoughts. I hope you all have a great day. Goodbye.